Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 3. So in lesson 3 we're going to get our first taste of some actual text mining and text analysis. And our goal for this lesson is pretty simple. We are just trying in this lesson to take a somewhat messier data set, something that would look like this. So for example, these are lines from Jane Austen books. What we want to do is turn that into a tidy text. So what exactly is a TidyText format? So I'm going to reference you all to our text mining R book, and the required readings for this lesson are Chapter 1, TidyText format, all the way through tidying the works of Jane Austen. So Chapter 1 does a pretty nice job of summarizing those tidy data principles and how those principles can be applied to analyzing text-based data. So what we're going to be doing in the remainder of this lesson is just working through some of the approaches to processing and preparing text-based data for analysis. One thing to keep in mind is that this tidy text format that we're going to be using in Unit 1 and in Unit 2 is going to serve us pretty well for doing some very basic analyses. So for example, looking at word counts of words in a document and comparing across documents, doing some examination of word frequency and doing some sentiment analysis and things like that. But there are also some other forms for storing text as a data structure. And these include things like data structures like strings. The corpus is a very common data structure, and so is the document term matrix. So we're going to be learning about these different data structures for text once we get into Unit 3 and begin doing some topic modeling. So let's dig in and start getting some hands-on practice with turning some messy text into a text format that we can use for later analysis. So let's revisit that example from one of our previous lessons where we took one of the poems from Emily Dickinson and we turned it into an object. So let's go ahead and revisit that. I'm just going to copy this over here, although I think I do have this still stored in my Unit 1 script. Let's go see if I still have this. Oh, there we go. I might have it right there. So I'm just going to bring that down. And you can see that I've started a new Lesson 3 outline comment here, so I can just go ahead and quickly navigate through the different things that we've been learning about. So I'm going to go ahead and add that down here. As you can see, I've been goofing around a little bit, and I've already created some data frames here. I'm going to go ahead and just clear all this out, because I'm going to start from scratch. So let me clear that out, remove hidden objects. So now my environment is clean there. And let's start fresh by creating this. So there we go. You can see that it created a new character vector, has 4 unique little string values here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And let's go ahead and take a look at that again. Now if you remember, we can just go ahead and type the object in there. It's going to pop up in our console down here. You'll notice too if we were to expand our console, let me do that really quick, then some of these lines are going to show up on a single line, and this 3 there is just letting us know that the carriage held but just ourselves is the 3rd value up here in this text object. Let me move this back here. There we go. All right, so we've created a object that's basically a character vector here. So what we want to do next basically is we want to change this little character vector that we created here. And effectively what we want to do is just turn that into a typical data frame or a table, or you can think of it as like a spreadsheet. Basically in a format that we can use for later analysis. So let's go ahead and, if you remember from lesson 2, we learned a lot of functions from that dplyr package: arrange, mutate, filter, select, etc., etc. And let's go ahead and load that if it's not already loaded. So I'm going to go check here. Looks like I already have it loaded, but I'll just do this again to demonstrate. So we have dplyr ready to go. So now all of the functions in dplyr we can use again. Let's see, anti-join is something we're going to be using later. Arrange is one that we've learned. You can see there's a lot of functions in here. I'm not going to go over all of them, but you can see that it's a pretty robust package of functions that we can use. And there's our filter one that we learned last time too. All right, so we've gone ahead and loaded that package. All right, and let's see what's going on with this one. I'm going to go ahead and run it, and then I'm going to walk through what's happening here. So let me paste it right here. All right, so basically what we're doing is we're creating a new data frame. And each of those values down here, so there were basically 4 values in this text object, line 1, line 2, 3, and 4. Basically we're saying we want to create a data frame, and we're going to create a new column in this data frame, and we want to assign values to those lines of text that we have down here. And then what this is basically saying is we're going to create a column here, and we just want to store the values from here. So we're going to create a 2x4 column, or 2x4 table basically. So let's go ahead and run this code. All right, I'm going to run it here, and voila. So now you can see we have a table here. It's a data frame. Let's take a look at this thing. We have 2 variables. Again, we have the line column that we made, and we have the text column, which should contain our lines from the poem right there. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. There we go. Yep, so line 1, line 2, 3, 4. Just for fun, I want to show you something else we could do. So we could change the order of these if we wanted to. And when we do that, the order that we created them is going to show up differently there. So now when we go to our data frame, we have our text here and then the lines there. Definitely like it better with the lines first. So let's switch those around again. There we go. And voila. All right, and now we have our very rudimentary data set, data frame that we're going to be working with. And our goal for the rest of this is to figure out how to tidy this up and get it something into something we can analyze. All right, before I go much further, let's make sure, do a little commenting here so I know what's going on, just as a reminder to myself. Let's see, so we are creating a data frame. And again, think of a data frame as like a spreadsheet or a table that you would use for typical analysis. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that actually in the console too. Text, text data frame, and there we go. So we can see that it's a tibble, which is a tidy table. We see that it is 4 rows long and 2 columns wide, and that our text column has each line of the poem. So as you can see, this table that we created, this data frame, is not quite ready for analysis yet. We need to do a few things. And since we're going to be focused on, for units 1 and 2, primarily just on word counts, word frequencies, and looking at kind of high important words through something we'll be learning in our next lesson, what we really want to do is get this text column here that consists of lines of the poem into just a single word or single token per row. So a token is essentially just a meaningful unit of text, most often a word. In our case, for units 1 and 2, we're primarily going to be focused on analysis at the individual word level, like I mentioned, word frequency, word counts, highlighting keywords. Obviously, we're not going to be interested in every single word within a text. So, for example, there's words like it and the and but and that really just aren't very useful or informative for doing some kind of high-level analysis. And the process of splitting our text into these tokens is called tokenization. So what we've done here, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. There we go. So these original Jane Austen books, as we can see, we had each sentence or each line from the physical book, And what we've done is tokenize those into individual words relative to a given line and relative and within a chapter. The TidyText package that we're going to be working with effectively has a function for tokenizing text. So let's go ahead and load that. And to be honest, I may have installed the TidyText package on my version of RStudio. Let me go see. Do a quick search, tidy. Yep, I've already have it installed. You can see that it's loaded. However, though, if you, I think at this point you may not have installed it. So I'll go ahead and just install it again. Install packages. Remember, we want to use our quotations when we're installing packages. TidyText. And then we can just run that command. Or we could also just go to install, type in TidyText, and then just install it that way. But as you can see, I already have it installed, so there's no reason for me to install it again. So once we've got it installed, obviously we're going to want to go ahead and load it. As you can see, I already have it installed and loaded, ready to go. So that means I can use the functions now that are within that. And of course, the function that we're going to be interested in is this unnesting tokens function, which is going to help us tokenize our data. Specifically, it's going to split our text into individual words for us and store those in a single column. But before we do that, actually, let's take a little quick look at this TidyText package. Let's see some of the functions that are in there. So one that we obviously are going to be using right away is this unnest tokens function, which splits a column into tokens using the tokenizers package. Speaking of which, one of the things that installing TidyText has done for us is it has also installed packages that it requires or depends upon for us. So you can see there's the tokenizers package right there that it's installed. Let's go back to our TidyText, and there we go, unnest tokens. So when we are using that unnest tokens function, these are the different arguments that we can use it. Again, think of arguments like options for executing a command or a function. So for example, here's a good example. By default, it's actually just going to lowercase every single word that it's tokenizing. In some cases, we may not want to lowercase everything. For example, there might be some proper nouns that we want to make sure are included, and things like that. But if you're ever curious about when you're running some of these functions and what these arguments are actually doing, it'll always have an explanation, most packages, for what specifically those arguments within a function do. So whether or not to turn the column lowercase or keep it as is. So let's go ahead and get some practice with using this unnest tokens function. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this over, save myself a little typing. As you can see from our last lesson, at the very end we were introduced to this pipe operator. So what this does within this tidyverse set of packages is it allows us to specify whatever data frame or whatever data set it is we want to do an analysis on, and just specify just once. So if we want to do some tokenization, and then we wanted to do some counting of words, and then we wanted to do some plotting of frequencies of those words, we would only have to call this data set once, or this data frame once, instead of writing it again and again. Another way we could write this, though, what we're probably used to so far at this point, is something more like this. So we would have calling our function. We learned in the last lesson that for the tidyverse set of packages, and for a lot of packages in general, the very first argument that you want to include is the actual data frame or whatever data it is you're working with. So in this case, it would be text data frame that we're working with. You can also see, aside from our data frame that we need to include, so we can tell it where the data is actually coming from, we have two other arguments here. We have this word argument and we have this text argument. This word argument tells us that we want to create this column that includes our tokens, and by default it's going to tokenize our text into individual words, and it's going to do some other things that we'll talk about as well. And then this is telling us where our text is stored that we want to tokenize. So if you remember, with our text data frame, all of our text is in this column called text. So it's saying, look in this column that's called text, take each line of here, each of these lines, and tokenize each of those lines into individual words and store it in the word column. So basically, if we go back here, this is where we want our tokenization of the text to end up, and this is where we're drawing from. So that's why it's called our output and our input. So let's go ahead and just run this, and we'll run it as they've written it, but this is effectively the same thing. All right, there we go. So what we've done is we've created a new table. And what we haven't done, though, at this point is we haven't stored that table anywhere, so you don't see it living up here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go ahead and use this one so I don't waste it. And let's see, I'm going to call this my tidy text, because now I've tidied it up a bit. And there we go. And we've got our tidy text. As you can see, when we had before 4 lines or 4 rows, now we have 20 rows because each word lives on its own row. Each word has its own row. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. There we go. It should look identical to this one. So just to recap, this unnest tokens function, what it does is it takes our text that we wanted to tidy up, and what it does is it creates a new column with individual words on each row for that column. It also does remove all of the punctuation. It converts all of our words to lowercase. Obviously, white space between words has been removed as well. And all of this is really just kind of the first step into our analysis process. So we have our text data, we convert it into tidy text. We might do some basic counts for some word frequencies, things like that, for summarizing the text. And then ultimately what we're going to do is to communicate some of our findings, information through visualizations that help make it a little bit easier to see what's going on with the data and gather some insights. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up this video with a little bit more of a complicated example of tidying some text. So right now we worked with just a little poem that we had kind of created. And what we're going to do is, for this one, we're going to use this package called Jane Austen R, and this was created by, I believe, one of the authors of this book. And we're going to use this to pull in some Jane Austen books to do some analysis on. For this particular part of it, we're only going to be doing the analysis. We're only going to be tidying this text, and we'll be doing some analysis on this text in the next lesson. But let's go ahead and get this ready to use. So we're going to need a few packages for this. We already have the dplyr package that's been installed, and I think we've already loaded it. But we do need this Jane Austen package, and we need the stringer package. So let's go ahead and get those loaded. I'm going to copy here. You can see I've already pasted here, and I already have it installed, so you can see it right there, but I don't have it loaded, so I'm going to go ahead and load it. There we go. So now I have the Jane Austen package ready to use, and as you can see, contains a number of things: Jane Austen books, complete novels, etc., etc. And what was the other one we needed? We also needed the stringer package. And I believe when we installed the Tidyverse suite of packages, it may have already been installed for us. But let's double check. Let's go to our packages. Stringer, where are you? I guess I could go ahead and, yep, there it is. So as you can see, we haven't loaded it yet, so let's go ahead and load it. Library. I'm just going to record it here because I like to have a record of everything that I've been doing. And now it's loaded. Perfect. So now that we have these packages loaded, let's go ahead and do some tidying of these Jane Austen books. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this over to my RStudio script. I'm probably going to go back at some point too and do some commenting here just to clean this up so I can easily reference it later. But let's walk through what's going on with some of this. So as you can see, we're creating a new object. This is going to be called original books. So let's go ahead and run this script. As you can see, we've already loaded our Jane Austen package. We've got stringer ready to go. We've got dplyr, so we can use all the functions there. Let's run this. You can select all of it. That's one way to do it. But it's going to know where your code ends, and then it's going to stop right there because we have a line break right there. Let's go ahead and run this. There we go. And we can see we created a new data frame. It's called original books. We can see that it has 4 columns and 73,000 observations. Let's take a look at this really quick. There we go. So we have, here's our text, and we're going to want to tokenize this in just a second. We've got the book that this text is from. We've got the line number from the book, and we've got the chapter from the book as well. And again, let's go back here and talk through what we did. All right, so let's start with Austen books there. As you can see in the Jane Austen package, Austen books is just a data frame of Jane Austen's 6 completed published novels. So we can actually take a look at that if we wanted to. So let's actually take a look at that. So Austen books, there we go. And let's view that if we can. So view, Austen books, and there we go. All right, so we can see the original data set just contains 1 column for the book, then 1 column for the line of text from the book. All right, so then we are telling to or take that data frame that we called up. We're saying we want to take that data frame and we want to group it by the actual books. So we can see we have Sense and Sensibility in here. We also have Persuasion, and we're going to create some groupings for each individual books because what we want to do next is we want to create some new variables here. So currently we only have a variable for book, what book it belongs to, and the actual line of text. But we do want to create, similar to what we had for that Emily Dickinson poem, we want to create a line number. And we can do that just by saying this row number. We want to assign that to each of these lines. And we also want to create a chapter number for that book. So we're going to create a variable, and we're going to use this regular expression here. To be perfectly honest, I don't know all the details for how this works. All I know about this one is that it does pull out the chapter names, or the chapters. And then finally, when we're completely done with that, what we want to do is go ahead and just ungroup these, and then we get our Austen books, our original books data frame. So actually, let's take a look at that. So there's our original books data frame. It's up here, and I actually just want to view that. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. So there we go. So we have the chapters that we pulled out. And sorry about that. We pulled out those chapters. Oops, get rid of some of this stuff. Here we go. We pulled out those chapters with this line of code. Again, like I said, I'm not exactly sure how that worked. We have our line number from the original book, and then the book itself. So our final step, what we'll be doing next is just tokenizing that text. And as you recall, that uses the unnest tokens function. So that's going to be our next step. This one's pretty easy. Let's go ahead and copy this. I'm going to paste it in here. This is using the piping. Remember, we could actually just do this instead. Oops. So we could say unnest tokens. We want to say take our original books as the data source. Oops. Original books as the data source. Again, part of the tokenization process, we're creating this new column for individual words for our specific tokens. In this case, by default, for the unnest tokens package, it's by individual words. It could be pairs of words or triplets of words, whole sentences even, but we want it to be individual words. And we're saying this is where you're going to find that text that we want to tokenize. So let's go ahead and do that. Oops, could not find, oops, that's because I need to load my, sorry, I need to load my TidyText package because it's not loaded. TidyText. And there we go. All right, so now we have our tidy books right there. We've got our 4 columns, 72,000 observations. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So book, line number, chapter, and word. So that wraps up. Those are a few examples of how we go about taking a sort of messy text data source and turning it into some tidy text that we're going to use for later analysis. Before we wrap up, one last thing that I want to show you is a common step that often takes place in preparing data, text-based data for analysis. So as you've already seen with our tidy text and preparing it, we do some tokenization to take our text and break it down into meaningful units of analysis, in our case individual words. We do some changing the case of the words to all lowercase, so words with different cases are just combined into the same word, so they're not treated as separate words. We remove things like symbols, etc., etc. But one of the things we often remove from text data that we want to analyze are words that really don't add much value to the analysis. And these things are these particular words are called stop words. So they're words like a, and, the, it, etc., etc., etc. So I just want to demonstrate really quickly how we go about removing those stop words, and it's a pretty simple process. So our TidyText package includes a data frame of just standard stop words. In fact, I think it includes 3 lexicons of stop words. And by default, it's just going to use all of the words that are included in those 3 lexicons, but you can specify if you want to particular ones that you want to use. So before we go ahead and remove these stop words from our TidyBooks data set, let's go ahead and take a look at these stop words. So we can just go ahead and call this, and we can either print it in the console and take a look. As you can see, it's going to truncate it, so we can also go ahead and view it. I think view needs to be capital. There we go. Let's take a look at these stop words. So as you can see, this tells you the lexicon that it comes from, and then this is called word. Which are just the list of stop words, basically. You can see there's quite a few of them. In fact, if we go over here, we have it stored as an object, so it doesn't show up here. But as we can see, there's 1,149 stop words in this lexicon. So let's go ahead and remove these words. One key thing to note is that the actual words that we want to remove, the column name is called word. And when we remove these words from our text, what the function is going to be looking for is a column that matches it. So it's going to say, within our stop words column called word, within our stop words column and within our TidyBooks column, look for any columns that have the same name. And if those columns have the same name, remove all of the words from the stop words. So let me show you what that looks like. This will explain it a little bit better. So our command, our function that we're going to use is called anti-join. And basically this is, instead of joining 2 data frames together or adding on a new column to a data frame based on matches to another column, what it's going to do is remove those. So anti-join, very similar to all the dplyr functions we've used. The first thing we're going to enter into this is the name of the data frame that we want to remove the words from. So we're going to take our TidyBooks data frame, TidyBooks, and we are going to take our stopwords data frame. And just by default, like I said, what it's going to do is it's going to look for matching columns, and then it's going to keep everything over here. But if there's a word in this column that matches over here, it's going to go ahead and remove it. So long story short, this is going to remove all those stop words from our TidyBooks data set. So let's go ahead and do that. And as you can see, let's go back to our original. All right, TidyBooks. So we can see line 5. There was, sorry, that's not it. Oh, there we go. So and was removed, by was removed, the was removed, etc., etc. So that's a pretty easy procedure for just going about removing the stop words. Just remember that the name of the column that we're removing the words from has to match the name of the other data frame that we are matching against. So that that's going to go ahead and wrap up lesson 3. Now that we've learned some basic pre-processing procedures for cleaning our data and getting it ready for analysis, in lesson 4 we're going to introduce some very basic approaches to doing some quick analysis.